The teaser trailer for the Fallout TV series on Amazon came out a month ago, and I've only just realised, which goes to show how badly out of the loop I am with this sort of stuff. But I've watched it now and digested some of the reaction, and for what it's worth I wanted to stop by YouTube to share some of my own thoughts and hopes for the show. I'm a big fan of the Fallout series. I got into it a bit later than some people. I started with Fallout 3, which was awesome. I never got round to Fallout New Vegas or Fallout 76, but I did play the shit out of Fallout 4, and overall I thought that was great. I don't fully understand the negativity it gets. Although I will admit the storytelling wasn't great, especially when it came to the different factions. Near the end of the game I genuinely don't know who to side with, not because I'm invested in the characters or I sympathise with that particular faction's goals and ambitions, because I'm just really not interested enough in any of that to care. The game hasn't done enough to draw me into those parts. But let's be totally honest here, big Bethesda open world RPGs have never really been known for their amazing storytelling. Their main selling point has come from exploring a vast open world, the limitless freedom to get hopelessly lost and distracted from your objective with the endless landmarks, side quests and things to discover. It's why games like Fallout and especially Skyrim, which I've been playing again recently, are so addictive and successful. It's why Starfield is just such a massive disappointment. It's a game marketed and designed to feel big but really isn't, prioritising quantity over quality. There's a lot of content there, but no soul. Chief among its many problems was the fact that it abandoned the one thing that makes Bethesda RPGs good in the first place, the limitless freedom. Without this distraction, the flaws in storytelling become more apparent. This brings me to my first point about the Fallout TV show. Obviously, it's not a video game, so it has no benefit whatsoever from gameplay distracting from a lackluster story. Given there's much less room for error, the story simply has to be good. But here's where I feel a little bit more optimistic than I have with previous adaptations to the big screen. I think the writers can take more liberties with a franchise like Fallout because the storytelling in the games has never been the strong point. Silent protagonists with the exception of Fallout 4 and multiple quest lines, some of which were more boring than others and easy to ignore if you wanted to, means that there's more room for invention and interpretation starting from a fresh slate, therefore posing less risk in pissing off the fans by bringing new ideas or making changes. Obviously, within reason, there are limits to that, big fat ones, but as long as the story is immersive and the writing is slick, I'll be a lot more forgiving about changes to the lore than perhaps I have been for other franchises. Of course, they do need to get something else pretty obvious right for it all to come together, and that is the setting. Fortunately, this little sneak preview does look good. It seems like Amazon are going to capture the aesthetic of the games pretty well. The vault looks great, very faithful, as does the variety to the wasteland with deserts and snowy wilderness. The Brotherhood of Steel armour is on point, as are the ghouls and the guns. There's a disgusting creature in the trailer at one point with human fingers as teeth, and this is what I mean by taking liberties. I don't recognise that thing from the games, but who cares when it looks so good? Besides, there's also rad roaches and the mutant bears that I can never pronounce the proper name of. Clearly the show has a big budget, which is to be expected. Hopefully it's not just going to be one of those things that is shiny and flashy on the outside, but shallow and empty underneath. And that brings me to my next concern after the story and the setting, which is the characters. Looks like there's going to be a bit of humour in the show. The teaser shows a guy spitting out some mouldy coffee, but I really hope they get this balance right. Fallout overall is not PG-13. It can be really goofy at times, but overall it's a dark, mature, gritty entity that spits blood, bile and hellfire. That's how the show needs to be. It needs to be loud, dirty, gruesome and basically not fuck about. Any light-hearted funny bits need to be sparse and carefully timed, put in place to provide no more than a momentary respite from the drama and intensity of life in the wasteland. It can't be the other way round, where funny things happen all the time, trivialising the serious nature of the franchise, with only token little bits of nasty stuff in there to tick a few boxes. I've also heard and seen a lot of talk about the female protagonist. Personally, I don't really care about that in itself. Fundamentally, it's a good thing. There have been plenty of really good female characters in games, movies and TV shows over time. But there's also been some god-awful ones too, and my concern is the obvious example from Amazon, Rings of Power. Galadriel has got to be one of the worst characters ever committed to screen. She's an insufferable, arrogant, selfish and entitled brat who talks down to everyone, especially men, but does nothing to endear the audience to her cause. Worse, she justifies none of this behaviour because she's just an all-powerful badass from the very start. She doesn't earn anything the hard way through trials and strife. She doesn't mature or develop or grow or become a better person. But nothing, and I mean nothing, can top what I think is the worst character assassination in any TV adaptation ever. An absolute insult to one of the greatest video games ever made, and that is Yennefer from Netflix's The Witcher. What a wasted opportunity. Look, before I go on a bit of a rant here, yes, I know this isn't Amazon, and I know it's also a very different genre to Fallout, but the principles are the same. There's a way to write good, strong characters, and there's a way not to do that. Yennefer for me is the best example of how not to do it. In Season 2, Yennefer loses her powers. It's the first time in decades that she's been without them, and it would have been really interesting to see how she copes with it in this hostile world. Seeing her toil and struggle to get by and survive not only would have been realistic and make her successes more satisfying, her decision to sacrifice Ciri to get her powers back would be slightly more tolerable if that's really the direction that we had to go in. The writers could have also done some interesting things with that decision as well, fitting her character arc from Season 1. In Season 1, Yennefer sacrificed her fertility in order to become a beautiful, immortal, wealthy sorceress, thinking that that would be the solution to all her problems. But in the end, she realises that none of that is important compared to her desire of having a child of her own after all. In Season 2, if she went through some of those proper trials and tribulations from losing her magic, it would make for a satisfying and tense situation when she realises that she has to sacrifice a child to get her powers back. But none of that matters. Nothing like that happens. Yennefer betrays Ciri without a second thought, for no reason, all the while getting by just fine without her magic, breaking prisoners out of chains using large battle axes, spitting fire into the faces of powerful mages, all while spouting off quirky one-liners and saying fuck, which is about as cool and badass as kicking a granny's walking stick out of her hand and running away with it. Look, my point is, with these weak, one-dimensional female characters, there is nothing there to sympathise with, relate to, and that can apply to male characters as well. Part of me thinks that these days writers are scared of showing vulnerability in certain characters. They don't want to upset the apple cart, and that's putting their own self-imposed restrictions on the quality of their storytelling. It's either that or the writers just don't have the skill set required to write decent characters anymore, in which case they should probably be considering alternative career paths. I just hope that whatever the reason is, none of this affects the main character in Fallout. It could all turn out to be absolutely fine. I do have this nagging concern that they're just going to make her an absolute badass, and that will be okay if she has to struggle and fail a bit first in order to get to that point. And before people start getting angry in the comments, this applies to characters regardless of their gender. I'm just singling out examples that really got to me of how strong, well-written female characters from the source material had been horrendously mutated and diluted. I guess that's another thing that Fallout has going in its favour. At least the characters they create will be entirely new, which again goes back to taking liberties, because at least it gives them the right to interpret their own characters how they want to. There's no real part of the source material that they have to respect in that regard. But yes, the point I'm making applies regardless of the character. Ultimate badassery only works if it's earned or punished in some way to make it interesting and justified, and that will result in a good payoff when that line of defiant dialogue is eventually delivered.
Get away from her, you bitch!
Something that does make me optimistic in this regard is that the narrator in the trailer is actually saying to somebody, presumably the protagonist, that they are going to have to adapt in order to survive this environment. Let's just hope that bodes well. So anyway, I guess at this point my hopes for Fallout are mixed. It has the potential to be either amazing, or terrible, or just plain average. But if it's far less like The Witcher and Rings of Power and more like, say, The Last of Us, then it will be a decent adaptation and a success story in my book.